Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Followership, the critical basis for team success digital event hosted by CMI East Midlands and Eastern Regional Board. My name is Michael Bolt, and I am the Events Delivery Manager at CMI, and I will shortly be handing over to Catherine and Tom Lee, who will introduce today's speaker. If you have any questions at all during this digital event, you can ask them using the live chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will answer as many as we can during the Q&A. Today's session is being recorded and will be shared with you later today for those of you who have booked to attend. And the event recording will also be available on the CMI website and the CMI YouTube channel. So without any further delay, over to Catherine and Tom to begin today's event.
Catherine, I think it seems you're on mute still.
I do apologise. Sorry, everybody. Thanks, Tom. Technical glitch there. I'll start again. So thanks, everybody, for joining us to discuss followership today. Followership is often considered to be the flip side of leadership. It's the ability to take direction and be a valuable team member. How well followers deliver on what is expected of them is as important as how well leaders lead the way. When followership fails, objectives aren't achieved and teams are left with unplanned outcomes. To explore followership with myself and Tom today is squadron leader Gary McIntosh. We'll call him Tosh. Tosh is a coach, course designer, and an RAF strategic training officer. And Tosh is going to be talking to us about different team conditions that can lead to poor followership, including low morale and poor work ethic, tips and techniques to help you cultivate positive team environments, the negative consequences of weak followership, such as unsatisfied customers, lost opportunities, and weak competitiveness. And lastly, he'll provide some insight on how to actively maximise your team's success as a result of strong followership. Welcome, Tosh. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Tom.
For the viewers, could you just give us a brief introduction to yourself and your background, and then we'll get into the event.
Yes, thanks again, and good afternoon, everybody. Tosh McIntosh, as I referred to myself, but Gary is what my parents call me. I've been in the RAF 33 years now, and although the story for most people in the military is you join as a teenager, and then you learn from your mistakes and grow through the ranks. But I initially joined the RAF as a physical training instructor, so a lot of my coaching and mentoring experience comes from sport, as well as the leadership management training that I've had and some of the roles that I've done. And then in 2005, I went to become a commissioned officer in the RAF and was successful. So I'm back at RAF Cranwell now in the trainer role. But during my 2005 to 2020 experience, I did a myriad of jobs, but it was all people focused, it was all team focused, and it was all based on the leadership, followership, and the good things that the RAF promotes and advocates. I must also add that I had a little bit of time out from the RAF. I thought the grass was greener on the other side, and I tried my hands in what we term as a civvy street. I went to the side, but I very quickly come scuppering back and stuck to what I do. So I'm very honoured to be here. I hope I can add some value. Happy to be challenged with the questions that we asked, and really look forward to this next hour.
Thanks, that's great, Tosh. And thanks for giving us your time to talk about it today. So, super. I guess let's kick off. Let's sort of start the session with a bit of a overarching question. So, is followership really a facet of leadership?
Yes, it is. It's, for me, everything we do is a form of leadership, be it good, bad, and there's some people that have a toxic sort of style of leadership, but followership captures those who are comfortable in their leadership styles. They're comfortable with applying different styles, but they don't always want to be in the front. And I think that's the key thing, that those that understand leadership as in leading over followership as in, there is a different style to do it. The coach in a sporting context isn't always there on the pitch, and the leader isn't always the person in front, but it's the person that you capture. So for me, it's 100% a facet of leadership. And depending on how much you play with it, you can get so much fun, experience, and enjoyment with trying the different ways that followership can offer you, while sort of maintaining that leadership role. And it's actually quite a little bit exhausting for some people, always being in the front, always trying to be or perceiving to be that leader. Why not use your high quality, high performing staff and let them take a lead, but with you in sort of ultimate control or a little bit of overwatch? So that's where I think it's a facet of leadership. And I'm a simple person, so I like to simplify things. And when I explain it to sort of teenagers of what is leadership, what is followership, I actually use the word ship and actually use it in a naval term. As if we have a ship without the rudder or the steering wheel, whichever you want to call it, and the engine, those two, they're inextricably linked. But without one, a ship or a team is not going anywhere. So you have to have those facets that work together, and it's not one fits all. So I'm a massive advocate, and I'd happily question or take challenge of someone saying that they're not linked.
So they're both necessary for success, aren't they? They're sort of the flip side of the coin.
Yeah, 100%. And I think for those leaders amongst us that have not fully tried or experienced followership, I would certainly say to them that give it a go. What you would normally do yourself, and you're almost hoarding to yourself, share it out and empower someone else to try it, and then follow their lead. And the military are very good at this. We use what we call the subject matter expert. We will empower that individual. They will be the leader for this situation, and all the other experienced managers and leaders then have to fall in line and follow that person. It is only specific to that job, and their skill sets aren't less. They're not disempowered in any way, but they have to apply a followership principle in order to let that person take control of that situation, because we can't do everything. We're not experts in all, and we're actually should be even better at learning from others as well.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So again, to sort of the next area, let's just step on to what are the actual principles of followership?
Excuse me. Well, I suppose if you Googled it, you would get a very long list. But now Google's doesn't deal with the human side. It's just what humans put into it, and then even then, it's that's what someone else puts in. So for me, and this is where it does get subjective, the principles of followership for me is trust. That big word. Now, what does that mean? But you've got to trust the leader, and it might be someone that you've just nominated as a leader, or it might be yourself as a leader, to trust that you're going to be empowering or engaging someone else. There's also this thing that you've got to manage the ego states, because a lot of people think that I'm a leader, so I have to lead, and all my conversation has to have leadership in there as well. And you need to almost in a coaching way, ask people to not be as direct, not be as forthright, and allow a little bit of space around people. So you have to manage that in a respectful way. And that's my next point, is being humble. Because people try to assume the role of a team leader, and if you've not done it, or you feel you're not good at it, or you've not had experience, that's where someone's got to put you in that situation, and then also encourage you to come out, or take you out if you feel like it's going bad, and then sort of review that, and then come back and try it again, but don't give up. And then obviously you've got to be, well, I say obviously, it should be obvious that we're good listeners. We've got to be actively listening, and we've got to be good coaches. We've got to know when to coach, when to mentor, when to lead, when to manage. And that's just us as human beings. And then we've got to impart that as good followers, or to apply the principles of followership as well. And that's about coming out of the leadership role, joining the team and seeing something differently. So, sorry, I'm trying to give a context, but I'm giving that list as well. And I'll just give you an example. Last Thursday, I went to Snowdon. I was hill walking, and 2 friends have never been to the summit. Now, I've been there 100 times, and it would have been easy for me to say to them, follow me, let's go. But I played the role of the follower and let them safely dictate the pace and the way they wanted to go up it. It's fairly obvious if you've been there, but even in those examples, you're always playing between the leadership, the followership, and what principles that you want to apply. And they apply to the people that are in front of you as well. So you're almost playing with it. There's no set rule. So
I guess there's an element of it is sort of, there's some of these overlaps about with talking about followership with things like authentic leadership and, having to be human and humble and a listener. So yeah, that's quite interesting. And it's sort of also being able to be able to play both roles in order to be a rounded team player and contribute to your team.
Yeah. And again, I've seen many examples of someone who, because they have that word leader, they feel they can't give anything up, or they have to control, and I keep harboring on that word, they have to control the situation, where the feedback is, are you aware you're like that, first of all? Because that's good feedback. But the second thing is have you tried letting someone else do what you're good at and see how they thrive? And then you've created a little bit of capacity, a little bit of space, but you're also, from a company perspective, you're creating a little bit of talent and a bit of succession as well. So there's so many good tenets of what followership is all about. But some people either don't understand it, that's fine, we can learn. Some people don't like it because they see it that way. Whereas if you're a true team player and you are a coach, mentor, or a leader, manager, and all the other lists that you want to have on your CV, you've got to play with these things. And it's not easy as well. We can all remember the first time we tried something and got it wrong. At the moment, we thought we were a failure. But now we're like, I've done it 100 times, we'll be fine. I think that's the thing with followership, because it's go back to that 2 sides of the same coin. You have to assume a different role. You can't take over. You've got to listen. You've got to, you might be thinking I can do things differently, but it's their lead, it's their chance, and let them have it the way we do.
Yeah, so it's employing a different set of techniques and different set of skills, isn't it? Yeah.
It totally is.
Okay, thank you. So some people would feel that following is a lack of leadership. Do you agree with that? I mean, we've touched on it, but
yeah, I actually do. I mean, if for those that were actively listening to your last question, then I'm a way to contradict myself. But I do agree with that, because if you don't understand it, or you're manipulating followership, then it is a lack of leadership, because you're ultimately getting someone else to do your work. And that's how it can be perceived if that's how it's sold. If it's sold in a different way, that you're empowering them, you're engaging them, you're enriching them, you want them to do better, you see things in them, you recognize talent, and the company wants to recognize talent in them, and the customers can get a better experience from the skill sets that we've not yet seen in you, then I would disagree. But I'm talking from experience, but there is an abdication of leadership responsibilities under the guise of, that's followership. No, that's being lazy, and you're setting someone up to fail, in my world.
So maybe it's the intent behind it. If it's an abdication, that's one thing. But if the intent is to build your team, create opportunities for others, and engender a sense of trust and team development, then that's
and that's the words, Catherine, is the team development and others. if you're doing it for your own gain, or you're sabotaging someone else who you're either threatened by or is not deemed effective in the team, well, they're separate conversations, or that's just what's the word I'm looking for? That's really sad that a person has to do that to another human being. But if you are considering others, and you're thinking of your team, and you're thinking of your company output, and you want everybody to be going in the same direction at approximately the same time, the principles of leading and following and knowing the direction of travel and meeting your overall aim can be achieved. But the flip side is, if you were to ask you or anybody in the audience, do you have an example where a perceived leader has abdicated responsibilities or done nothing when required? I'm sure we'd have a very hot chat line, because we've all been there and done it ourselves.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, thank you. Just sort of, I guess it comes back to intent, doesn't it? And desire for team success versus individual or personal gain. So, where there's another area we'd like to talk about is where there's followership. Where is followership effective when you're being a leader and a manager? So how do you use followership to be an effective leader and manager?
So if I was to say, like, I'm racking my brains, I'm looking up here and I'm accessing my brain as I speak here. Where is it effective? Well, it's effective when you have engaged with a person or a team and you've informed them of what you're about to do. So let's make the scenario. Catherine, I'm going to put you in charge of this situation, and I know you think you're not that good at it, or you've not got the confidence, or whatever reasons you want to list to say why you're not the best person. But we get to the point where I say, well, I recognize this in you, and do you know what? If it goes horribly wrong, I will be there by your side, or I will catch you if you fall, so to speak. We'll be there. We'll do this together. But you're the lead, and at any point you're feeling comfortable, come out. Now, that should hopefully make you feel a little bit more supported, but a little bit more empowered and more valued, more invested in as a human being within your company or on your personal goals. So that's the effect it can have if people want to do that. And the bad effect is if I tell you that's what's going to happen and I don't really care what you think, because it's going to happen anyway. And by the way, it's happening tomorrow morning. You'll probably not sleep tonight, and that is the in effect of it. But I think the main effect or effectiveness of leadership and followership is getting to know your team, or getting to know certain individuals, and understanding what they want and what you see in them. And you're almost having that edgy conversation of, I think you have more. And it's not to say you're going to do my work. It's just to say that, you need to spread your wings a little, or you have that. And that's where, I know we're getting into a little bit of the management side here, but that's where the leader stroke manager can be effective, and then also empower that person to then step back and let them own the space. Now, I have a saying that there isn't a lot of space around someone who thinks they're a highly effective leader. And actually, if they're not as highly effective as they think they are, then you don't want to be in that space anyway. So you're actually happier just falling, and you're almost waiting on the fall. If you can create space for people to step into, they might use you as a role model and say, I'm not as good as that, or whatever people do. But ultimately, if you just create the space, life is a little bit easier, and there's more development and growth in the individual. And I think that's what a good leader and manager should be always encouraging.
It goes a little bit to, it's a bit of an overlap with the concept of psychological safety. You're creating the psychological safety for your team to step in, to take on that role, and knowing that you'll be there to catch them and to support them, isn't it? I guess it's sort of encouraging.
Yeah. I think don't know if I'm off piece here, but the psychological or the psychology or the thinking or the reasoning or the rationale behind leading and leading and followership I suppose you flip it another way. If I was to ask everybody right now, when was the last time you've seen a great example of leadership and followership? We would rack our brains, and most of us wouldn't think about what's happened in the last hour, because just making a cup of tea or opening the door or little human interactions that have happened, someone has been trained, be it through their culture or their behavior or their upbringing, to be a leader or a follower. And it happens all the time. But if you're not aware of it, or you just see it in a working context, then you miss lots of data that's around you all the time. And that psychological safety and that empowerment of people to grow and widen and be even better is what is incumbent on every leader and manager to create. We have a saying, and it's not a saying, but it sort of is. It's not written down. Is we set, because we move around every 3 or 4 years, we try and set everything up for someone else to come in and take it on. So we're almost setting our jobs off for us not to be there in a few years' time. But in some corporate companies, that's like, no, I am the pillar. If I'm not here, then things are going to fall over. And people create that. And that is not good followership, or that's not good leadership. Therefore, there will be no followership. Whereas, no, certainly in the RF, we try and inculcate that.
Yeah, that's you create your own succession planning problems if you don't encourage leadership in your team, and therefore if you're not able to be a follower and develop your followership and promote your team members, then you're going to have succession problems, aren't you? So it's
yes, you're so true, so true.
You mentioned the military, so that's a good segue onto the next question. So that's what value does the military place on its leadership training with regards to followership?
Well, so we place a lot of value, and I'm going to explain why we do that very soon. But now to answer that question, it is high, and the reason it is high is I work at the Officer Training Academy, where anyone who wants to be a commissioned officer in the RAF, they have to come through RAF Cranwell for their initial officer training, and you don't even get to be assessed in your officer knowledge that you've had training on if you're not showing the correct principles of followership and leadership at the get-go. Now, bear in mind, just for context, for those that don't understand the military fully, the most senior officers, the Chief of Air Staff, came through RAF Cranwell in whatever year he did. So the most senior rank position, the chief exec, I think it's an equivalent, of the RAF, went through the same training as people do today. And the followership principle is the same, because not everybody knows everything. And the bigger the organization, the amount of staff that a company has, it's even harder to micromanage them. So you have to have that ethos, you have to have that balance, you have to have something that underpins what you do and why you do it. So the principles of followership and trusting others that they know their job for your job to be done, regardless of what environment, and I must chuck in where it is in the world, is there. And that's why followership is a massive tenet of personnel in the RAF. I'm sure it's the same in the military as well for the two other services.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. That's that gives a good explanation. I mean, I think in the public sector as well, where I'm predominantly from, private sector, where I'm predominantly from, it's similar. You're not a rounded leader if you're not able to develop your team and to build your succession plans and bring on board the best team you've got, enable your team and allow them to be the best team you've got. And to do that, you need to give them the space and the capacity to lead and then follow them.
You're so true. And the RAF has they call it air publication, AP1, air publication number 1, and it's purposely been given that number is because it's the most important, and it's about our ethos and core values. And so it's everything what I've just said, But that talks about, we all like a good anagram. It talks about rise. It talks about respect. It talks about integrity. It talks about putting the service before yourself at times. And it talks about excellence, striving for excellence. So if you don't know in the RF what AP1 is, you shouldn't be in the RF. And more importantly, if you're not inculcating the tenets of the R, the I, the S, and the E, then you will be held accountable, not from your superiors. This is from everybody. They will ask you, why are you not setting standards? Why is there no respect? Where did integrity come in there? And because we can't be everywhere, we're not as ubiquitous as we used to be. So we have to have something accountable, and that's what underpins us.
In a sort of turning your sort of the sectors on their head now, have you seen examples of big team organisations that could be better at using the principles of followership?
Yes, I have. Again, just to give a little context. So I've worked with people, with teams, with companies that are non-military. I've worked with sporting organisations that are non-military, and that's in the winter sports and summer sports, football. And it's a little bit like what we were saying just before we went live. There is some, I'll say people and organisations, but certainly some leaders that don't see followership as akin to leadership. They don't see the both sides of the same coin. No, they see them as separate. Therefore, they see following as that weakness that you were asking earlier on, and they don't see it as true, dynamic leadership of, if I'm this person and I'm in this role and that gives me this status, then why would I give it to someone else? Because you can, and that's within you to do that, and that's what other humans do. And if we were all to feel lucky or appreciative of whatever we have in life, be it title, status, or anything that's important to us, then we should once we get to where we want to be in life, we should then look to try and sort of pass some of that knowledge on, and be it in a coaching way, a leadership way, manager way. But some people don't. If it's through toxic leadership, if it's through almost a dictatorial style of leadership, we're missing out on the principles of followership. And when you bring it up, or when you discuss it, or when you say to some certain people, have you thought about getting that individual to do this? And you watch how they do it, they're almost going to get your point across, and you could see it from a coach point of view rather than the person in front. Because generally the person that's in front doesn't really see what's going on behind them. And then you can argue that the person at the back is maybe seen or perceived as not being a true leader because they're not in the front. And that's the chicken and the egg argument that I'm sure many will have, or thoughts will have an opinion. People have thoughts and opinion on. It's such a hard subjective thing to say this is the way to do it, because we're talking about humans and we all do things differently. Even if you have the best laid plan, humans will come along and either disrupt it in a good way or disrupt it in, well, that wasn't what I was thinking about. So I'm sorry, I don't know if I've answered the question there, but I do think that there's a lot to be had from followership, and there's a lack of full understanding of how it can be applied outside of the military.
Yeah, it's so the next question I was going to ask, actually, we've already covered. So we're going to talk about are leading and following linked and being two sides of the same coin. But I think we might have explored that sort of earlier on. And so unless is there anything else you wanted to talk about on that, or are you? Yeah.
I think that, I mean, it's a bit like the questions that are coming in here. Seemed hot there, but the analogy of the both sides of the coin. There is a time, and it's on the leader or the manager, the decision maker, because ultimately everybody's accountable for something in life, be it your private life or your professional life. And if you've assumed that leader role, be that as a parent or in your work, then a decision you make and you get wrong, then you learn from it and you move on. If you make a decision and it went well, or experience or sixth sense, intuition is telling you to try something, then go for it. Because if it's a safe environment, what's the worst that can go wrong? But I truly think that if more and more of us were to start playing, and I'll start with that word, playing with what we understand followership as part of leadership, then we'll know when to intervene. We'll know when to either review. Sometimes what someone deems as a catastrophic failing isn't actually catastrophic. It's just not. They just don't like failure. But who does? Nobody really likes failure. And talking it through and adding a little bit of coaching and mentoring to the conversation of that didn't go well. Fine. That's certainly how we do it in the military. That's what I'd encourage individuals to play with more. And I would certainly add that followership is one of those things that you can play with and say, it's not as high up there as my leadership attributes, but it can be. And I think the other thing you have to add there, Catherine, is how come we are with coaching and mentoring yourself and others on how it could be better, because we don't like the direct feedback of, oh, that was rubbish, wasn't it? Closed question. I can only say yes or no.
There's an element of emotional intelligence, isn't there? It's sort of tied into this, being able to understand that if we have historically been coached to be leaders, to be sort of leading from the front and at the vanguard, but actually now we're talking about followership. It is the ability to take the step back and delegate and empower others. So it's, I think as leaders, we need to be emotionally aware enough. And if we're not great at it, to challenge ourselves to, do better at it.
Yeah. And again, the words, I know I've said them, but I've seen you nodding at them a few times. If we're actively listening, if we create an element of safety, psychological, professional or personal, and for someone to thrive or to get things, you're not setting them up to fail, but accepting that things will go wrong because that is life. And then you're looking at emotional intelligence. There's a lot on the leader already, and that might just be for one person. So why not let others have a chance to go and lead in key things that you've done a million times and probably could do in your sleep, when you could sit and play a different role and you can actually be that support mechanism, because that's a form of leadership as well. And that's maybe what most people need more of, is more of their, this feels specific to me rather than generic to all. And you can create that just by spotting micro detail that the person in front leader doesn't see, because they're just, they're pointing that way and going, who's with me? Why can't you keep up? I'm not saying everybody listening is like that. And I'm not saying everybody who is the title of a leader against the name is that. I'm just saying that there's people out there that are like that.
That's a really good segue into the last thing I wanted to ask you in this section before we hand over to our pre-submitted questions and our audience live questions. So the last thing is, have you got any great examples of followership that people may not see or realize is followership in action?
Yeah. So just today, we had a brief this morning at work, and the person that was meant to give the brief, it's an audience of 30 people. And I said, are you prepared for this? And the individual went, yes, I am. I said, that's good. It's going to be well. You've done it 100 times, because some people don't like public speaking. Yeah. And then anyway, it comes out, I said, how was your weekend? And then it transpires that this individual had some family thing going on. And actually, they only came into work to do this brief, and they should have been back with their family right now. So I just said to them, look, I'll do this and you go. Now, is it leadership? Is it followership? But the worst that could happen is that the individual will say, no, I have to do this. it's my lead. I couldn't possibly have you do it. Or they could accept and recognise that someone has went, you need to be at home with your family right now, and you need to solve what's going on, and this will get done anyway. So that just happened this morning. But I'm sure it happens in everybody's life all the time. But I go back to what I said a few minutes ago. If you don't really understand or look into when did you last take the lead and when did you actually choose to follow, until you understand that, there's probably 10 scenarios that have happened today. And there's certainly lots of instances. That's just a relevant one. A less relevant one from 2 weeks ago. Because the RF has this thing called rank, some people think that people who have a lower rank are not as capable. 2 weeks ago, I gave an individual the responsibility of leading on a project, a massive project, and he was the lowest rank, but the most experienced. But it's on my watch. Sorry to use the military terms there, but it's on my watch. And he is the most suitable person to do this job. So I said, you're the lead, and I'm here if you need me for anything. And he said, thank you. Some might go, oh, it's not for me. But that is where you have to get that understanding and play with leading and following. So I don't know if they're two helpful examples, but I've certainly done that in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think it's a very dynamic thing, isn't it? That the dynamism between those two is it feels like it's a constant interplay between leadership and followership in one's day-to-day organizational life.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's great. So Tosh, I'd like to hand over now to Tom, who is going to talk to you about some of our pre-submitted questions and some of the live questions that our viewers have submitted. So I'll hand over to you, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Tosh. Some really interesting points there being raised, and it's sparked off some good questions and good comments in the chat. So I'll kick off with a few of the questions that have come through. So first one is from Ketki. So how do you get your point across to non-followers?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. And I suppose asking a military person, the perception might be as well, you shout at them. But that doesn't actually work. It doesn't work with your children either. But how do you get your point? For me, I have to understand why they've either chose to not follow, or are they aware that they're being perceived as non-followers. So I would say to Ketki as well that whichever one it is, if it's both, it could be trickier. But if they've chose, I am not following this any further, then there has to be that conversation, and there has to be the clarity of here's the impact you're having on the team, the customers, the company's focus, the output, and actually on yourself, because you're probably spending more energy choosing not to follow than be part of a whole team moving in the same direction. So I would almost have to understand that. And of course, if it's that bad, then there's processes you could do. But on the flip side, I don't know if I'm alone here, but I don't think any human sets out to be malicious or antagonistic to any team, but there is generally a root cause of why someone is either not or being perceived as that type of person. And that's where a good conversation, not a chat, not a debrief, an open conversation where you might have to have a few awkward words or a few awkward sentences in there, but as long as you're treating them like you would like to be treated yourself, that's your starter for 10.
Yeah. And do you think that's linked to the level of engagement from the individuals in the team as well?
Massively. I think leaders nowadays have to be, I know it means a different word currently than it used to be, but leaders have to be influencers. They have to influence something, and they need to ensure that a change happens if it requires it. But on the flip side is those little micro chats that they're having with one-to-one people don't need to be shared with the whole team, because that individual might just need that little positive stroke that's been lacking. Or on the flip side, like I was saying earlier to Catherine, is they might just need to know that I see things in you. I see leadership traits in you. I see followership traits in you. go and play with them, go and try it and feel how different it is, because your wings will only get spread wider.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So another question here from Attalo. So how much is technology and innovation impacting and shaping team success at the moment and within the next 5 years? And how important is it for companies to do their best to keep up with those subjects within their organisation to provide up-to-date tools for their teams?
Yeah, well done for presenting that as one question. There's about 5 there, I think. But I think from what I remember there is certainly innovation. I'm not even sure we can start planning 5 years out, because we can have the strategy of what 5 years out looks like, but actually technology and innovation wise, we're working on a 12-month cycle, I think now. And if the underlying question in this is that we don't have the right technology or equipment to do our jobs in this innovative world that we live in, then the leader has to have that conversation. The manager has to say, boss, this is, we need these things that are going on. But if you flip it into making people better, here we are now on a live stream. We've certainly seen through the pandemic, the raise in kudos and how beneficial all the Zooms and the FaceTimes and Teams meetings have become. Personally, I think they're fantastic and they work when we're in a multi-national organisation and we're all in the 4 corners of the world. On the flip side is, there's certain times you just can't beat a little bit of human interaction, a bit of face-to-face as well. So I think it's massively important, and I think it's important for the companies to be involved with that. But let's not forget that we still need humans to lead, manage, and grow our workforce in a way that makes them keep abreast of this technology as well.
Okay, thanks. So next up, we've got a live chat from Samantha. And the question is, if things go wrong when you've delegated a task, how do you deal with having to step back in and then start leading again?
Yes. Well, so again, you'd have to define what goes wrong, what the word goes wrong means when you've delegated. So if you're delegating something, you're giving it to someone that you know is already able to do it. If you've empowered them to do a task for the first time and you think, no, this is something that you should have a go with, totally different. The person may need that time, they may need the support, and it will probably go wrong anyway. But like you're saying to Catherine, you don't set anybody up to fail, but it might not go right.
So you have responsibility of a leader to delegate to the right people in the first place.
Yeah. So if you've made all those responsibility risk assessments and it just generally goes wrong, it's going to happen. And sometimes you learn more from that than you do it going bang on, exactly to the script. And then how do you deal with having to step back in and then lead in? Well, if it's major, you're going to have to do that. And you just have the conversation later and say, I stepped in at that point because I felt this was going to happen. On the flip side is gaining control back as the leader. I'm sure that Samantha has got experience of that, but there may be times if there is a time where you've done that, then I would also then say you've probably given the individual the wrong thing to start with, or by delegating it, then it means that you've maybe not wanted to do it yourself. I'm just conscious of that word delegated and what it means. So I don't know if it's a dual meaning. So, but if you think someone could do it, try it, and it might feel wrong. If not, maybe you shouldn't have delegated in the first place. But the leader always has to have that power to step in when they feel they need to.
Okay. And there's a follow-up question from Samantha that says, if you have had to take back control, how do you keep the motivation high so they can feel they can lead again next time?
That's the conversation. That is massively a conversation where they would do most of the talking on how they felt, because you're going to have to go through you took that off me. You shouldn't have put me in there type conversations. I didn't feel ready. You will get all that because that's what some people do. But on the flip side is once you've understood that, and that would be a natural reaction, you're almost saying, well, let's do it again. Let's do it in a different way. You still have this. Now you've got the experience of how you felt then. Let's flip it. And how do we make it look better the next time? What do you need more of to make this a success? Because nobody gets anywhere they have in life by getting it right first time.
So it's all about working together with your team to understand it in more detail.
Totally is. And the quality of the conversation is what counts. Again, I'm talking from a military experience here. In the past, we're fantastic at it now, but in the past, there was too many times you were debriefed, you were told, and then you had to just go, and there was almost no room to come back with a reply. Now we're more coaching and collaborative. That's what I would recommend everybody takes on.
Okay, thanks. So next up, we have another live question from Leanne. So how do you introduce followership into an organization that doesn't have this as an existing part of its culture? I think that's probably a very relevant question to a lot of people watching this today.
Yeah. So again, if we're in agreement that followership is part of leadership, then I would say you have to introduce it, because most organizations definitely have leaders and leadership types of training and leadership types of development. So I would just be asking to know more or have training on followership as part of my leadership development. It's almost like a covert way to feed it into what should be already set up in organizations. If we're then saying, well, my organization doesn't have much leadership training, then that's a different conversation. I would certainly, in previous job that I had, we brought leadership and what it means to individuals, and then brought followership and what that means to the perceived leaders, because we're all leaders. We don't need a title to be a leader. Therefore, we're all followers, and we don't need to have the company bringing followership in to understand it. It's almost applying where it fits in with your team and where you are in life and what you want from either your personal goals or your professional goals. But I would certainly be asking to introduce it in some form of staff training, leadership management training, or asking the leadership team, senior level or mid level, what their understanding of it, and could they do a session for small or large teams on followership for that exact reason. I'm sorry, Leanne, if that's a woolly approach, but it's hard to give the context.
Yeah, it's all about getting that first steps into the organization.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so a question here from Richard, and he asks, is there a need to specifically teach the differences between leadership and management?
I think I would have to say yes there, because although there some, it's like coaching, mentoring, leadership, followership, leadership. There's certain words in life that just naturally go together. But for me, I always unpick anything that's trying to get merged together. Management, you could manage anything. I can manage moving a chair. I could manage drinking water daily. But leading the drinking of the water or the moving the chair involves a human being. So you have to keep them separate, and then once you're comfortable with your leadership style and your management style, and you then understand it, you could merge the word as Tosh leads and manages effectively. Words that you would get in a report, but they're not one, and they're definitely not the same. I'm immediately thinking to a sporting context here, as when I'm skiing. If you could lead a group from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill, well, that's fine because the piste directs you. But if you could manage to do 300 turns in that slope, there's a different dynamic to the leadership of A to B, and the management of what you want them to do in between getting A to B. And certainly in a work environment as well, if I need someone to lead on a task, then they are the accountable person, but there'll be a lot of managers involved that would feed into that leader, which is a little bit like the follower as well. So totally have to be separate until you fully understand them.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So we've got one of the pre-submitted questions from John. So is there a conflict in the need between leadership and followership? For a considerable time, we have sought to develop leaders in the workplace. Why now re-emphasize the need for followership?
Yeah, again, John, it's a really good question. So for me, I don't feel that we're introducing followership. I think we're just talking about it because it's been there for years. And it's, it's pretty much what I've been saying already. It's how you apply with it, how you apply it, how you play with it, and where you see it fitting in your organization. But I'll go back to my question. If I ask you to really think about where you've applied followership of late, be it professionally or personally, you've been doing it a lot anyway. And we've certainly been doing it as human beings, from our childhood, because there's certain times when you'll go first and there's certain times when you have to wait. That is leadership and followership in its basic terms. If you're to bring it into a working environment, it's not new, it's different. And that's what I think we need to be clear on. Okay,
I think we've probably got time for one last question from Kevin. That is, how do you influence those who seem to have their own agenda within a team? Sometimes someone is just not a good fit for the team. However, you're stuck with them.
Yes, well, it's a little bit like the non-follower question. But for me, it's all about the conversation. And that is where the leader and or manager has to earn their money. They have to be accountable, and they have to take that one on. They have to have a meaningful conversation. It might be awkward at times, but if we go on the assumption that not everybody comes to work or wakes up to be a nasty person, then there's just something that we have to unlock in individuals. And if they are being perceived as that, that's the easy one to play back as a feedback point of view. If they're purposely doing that, then there's certainly processes and procedures that you could apply in any organization to do that. But the reality is, it's a bit like, some children at school when they're bored and troublemakers. It's because they're not being stimulated in a different way. And that's what we as leaders and managers need to focus on, because they might be the next leader and manager, but they're just sitting there twiddling their thumbs, bored. Therefore, that's their disruptive nature coming in. Has to be the conversation. You need to understand them fully. And if it just means that they're not being empowered enough and not being engaged enough, then that's the challenge. Set those objectives, and we have the good old, the midterm appraisal or an MPAR. Again, sorry, I don't know the exact words what they are elsewhere, or your annual reports where you could set objectives and you could incentivize people. We shouldn't see these things as bad things, but I do recognise that they're used as in a bad way as well. We all just want to summarise on that one, Tom. Is we all like feedback. We do like recognition, but we don't do our job for it all the time. But that impromptu conversation just transforms an individual's mindset. That thank you, that please, that email or letter from someone going, I seen what you did last week, and I've just heard what you did. Thank you. They're the leadership and management skills that we need to stay on top of and be current with, because that's what gets our team out of bed every day.
Yes, there's a lot there about us as leaders then, and how we can influence our teams and the amount of effort that we need to put into to maintain that.
Definitely.
Thanks very much for answering those questions, Tosh. I'll bring Catherine back in to the conversation now.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, Catherine.
Are you on mute again?
Sorry, apologies. So, Tosh, thank you very much. That's been great. Thanks for sharing your insight and your experience, and for responding to our viewers' live questions. That's been really helpful. I'd like to thank you for your time and for sort of being with us today. I'd just like to, we like to ask our guest speakers to give our members, our members and our viewers some real practical tips they can take away. So could you just give me like maybe your 3 key takeaways, your 3 top tips from this that people can take away in action?
Yeah, put us under pressure there. I think to keep consistent with what I've tried to mention throughout this live sort of talk. One thing I would ask, and it's purely because it works for me, is I do this thing called a huddle. It's not a meeting. There's no agenda. There's no minutes taken. But I get my team, or the team that I work with and for together, and we just discuss what's on their plate. So the level of conversation that they have, or we have, but talking about what's on their plate is invaluable to me, because if I hold a meeting and tell everybody all the time what's on my plate, I don't know anything else that's going on. So I would say to someone, again, you could easily find what it is, but I'm sure most people do it anyway. But I do it. I've been doing it for years. I have a huddle. I get together, and it's 30 minutes of time where I speak to the staff and I ask them to tell me what's important to them at the time. And it may have been the week that's gone, or the week that's coming, or the year, but there's no set agenda. It's their time. So I would certainly say that as a top tip. I would also say, and certainly from the questions that are coming in, enrich and empower your staff, and really show that vulnerability from yourself, and have, even if the conversation doesn't go right, but the humans know what you're trying to say and what you're trying to achieve. But if you come away from it either personally feeling enriched or empowered, or you've managed to enrich and empower someone else, do that, because it isn't a false thing if you're consistent. So really work hard on that, and get feedback as well. Take the feedback from them. And also the final thing, which pretty much is covered what there is, acknowledge that it won't be perfect all the time. But if you're a good team, you're a cohesive team, and you know what you all have to do when required, and you're comfortable with leading and when to follow, then things will go wrong, but you'll actually learn more from that, and be even better and stronger going forward, because we're all human. That's how it is. It's the person that gets things right all the time where you're unsure, or you just never ever be like them, so you will not relate to them. That's what I would say. I've just put there, leaders should measure themselves on what they do for their team. That would be my final line.
In a nutshell. Thank you. Thanks, Tosh. That's great. So I'll just hand over back now to Central CMI, but thank you for joining us.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much. And that is it for today's session. I want to extend a big thank you to everyone who's joined us. Of course, thank you to Catherine and Tom, our hosts for this event. And of course, Gary, our speaker, for your insights and your expertise. Don't forget, if you are a member of CMI, you can log into Management Direct using the link in the live chat, and you can find a wide range of exclusive and practical development resources and much more. If you are not yet a member or a subscriber, you can join our community via the link that is also in the live chat to gain full access to our Management Direct portal. And you can also sign up to the free CMI newsletter for the latest trends and tips for managers and leaders. Please also take a few moments just to let us know your thoughts on today's event by completing the evaluation form, and the link is in the live chat. So thank you again for joining us, and do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.